let me start this video by saying I really hope I'm wrong about the Guardian, and that it actually is good, but I have a lot of doubts about it for various reasons, and I hope to just guide you through that logic. I see that it's vaguely pretty popular over on Reddit. I'll pull up some posts of the people that don't like it, but you notice the post I'm pulling up will have like 20 upvotes each, where there are a lot of very positive threads on it at like 400, 300 upvotes. So this is a very well-received class in the most case, but I am not receiving it well because I just don't think it does much of anything. It promises a lot and it looks like it has stuff, but I think that if you actually break down the types of things it would be doing, the entire class begins to fall apart in ways that are, quite frankly, pretty sad. And makes it so that way it doesn't do the tank role, as well as other classes that already exist, such as the Barbarian, Champion, Fighter, and the Monk. I think it is not good, and that's a shame. Some adjustments might be able to make it better, and with that, let's just get into it. And so, in order for me to fully explain why I find that class so utterly disappointing, I need to first describe what tanks already exist in the game, because it's important context. And we're going to start with Champion, who is currently considered to be the Giga tank class that currently exists. And so, Champion has a slightly slower armor progression, but it's still very high, and it has the same 10 HP per level that you would get as a Guardian. And it also, if you are a good aligned cause, has a reaction that gives resistance equal to 2 plus your level. Okay, very similar so far. So why am I so disappointed? And, well, it's because the Champion reactions actually progress the game state. They do something meaningful that makes it so that the fight could possibly be swung by these reactions. Retributive Strike lets you make a full accuracy melee strike while doing this. Redeemers force the enemy into a choice that'll either reduce their damage or completely negate their damage. And this Enfeebled 2 is reducing their damage and reducing accuracy of their strength. And if they're a melee attacker, which your champion reaction triggered, they're probably gonna be in that melee-ish creature range, so this Enfeebled will actually reduce their damage even further. And Liberator, which can let enemies, or your ally, escape a grapple, or get a step to force an enemy to spend more actions to get after them, thus wasting time of the enemy. These are things that notably change the game state massively. And this is what forces your creatures to attack into your allies so that you can then punish them. Or rather, that's the thing that makes them want to hit you, because they can't hit your allies. And the thing that makes them not want to hit you is you have up to legendary armor starting at level 17, and you have a wad of HP. If they hit you and you have a shield raise, you can also shield block. And that's how Champion functions as a tank. They force that enemy to attack others because they're so bulky. And then if they hit you, you're still fine with that because you're a character built to absorb that damage. Now, Monk shows what happens if you have all that bulk, but then no way to generate that aggro. Because with Monk, the best way to play around a tank Monk is to just simply ignore them and walk away. They don't have anything to protect allies in their base kit. You can build the Trip Grapple Monk to hold enemies in place and force them to fight you, and that's how you'd usually build a tankier Monk. They do have great mobility to be able to find these weird positions and chase down backliners, but they're not a Giga Tank because they can't generate that aggro easily. And Fighter is a tank because it has this massive amount of HP and it generates aggro by threatening damage. Because you can't just ignore a fighter sitting still and swinging out. That is how you lose very quickly. So fighter is a threat that needs to be dealt with, and you can't just simply run away from and ignore the fighter, because then you get a reactive strike to the forehead. And fighter will actually bring a fight to a close by itself as a tank. As long as your fighter stays alive, you have a strong damage dealer that is going to end the fight that is still bulky enough to absorb hits. And then you have Barbarian, which does the same idea as the fighter. Simply be big, absorb hits, deal damage. And yeah, that's what it comes down to. And in a previous video, I have mentioned there are 3 things a tank needs to do. I'm going to pull that up on screen. And here are the 3. You want them to be able to take hits, you want them to be able to draw aggro, and you want to make them waste enemies' time. Because all 3 of these are necessary for a tank to exist. 1, if you can't take hits, you're not a tank. You're a backline controller. That's a difference maker, because a wizard does these other 2 in spades. If you think about slows, if you think about how Fireball actually denies actions by killing things, wizard is a tank if you ignore number 1, and wizard is obviously not a tank under the traditional sense, so number 1 must hold. Number 2, in order to be a tank, you need to draw aggro. Now, in that monk example, where everybody just ignored the monk, were they a tank? They're definitely protected, they could take hits, but they failed to draw aggro onto themselves to have their taking hit capability actually matter. And that's the issue with the Tower Shield Monk builds. You need to have something in order to make enemies stand there and fight you as a tank on your terms. That's what an aggro drawing ability should do for you. And this is all in service of number 3, making enemies waste time. Because the goal of a tank is not to stall out a fight forever, it's to stall out a fight long enough to where your buff scaling starts to take through. Your damage dealers have enough time to take out a key threat or 2. You give your casters the space they need to be able to put the big debuff onto the boss. That is the end goal of the tank. This number 3 is the main thing a tank must accomplish in order to be considered successful. And Champion is the best at buying that time for their team. Because of their good aligned reactions that reduce damage to that ally, and then present a threat themselves, so that way they're forced to attack into a higher defense character. Champions also provide some self-healing, so their HP is actually higher than you would expect. Now, let's look at the Guardian. Looking at the Guardian, you can see that they have a resistance passively to one of the 3 mundane damage types that scales based on how good their armor is. And if you assume that in a normal fight, you're getting 3 resistances off at level 1, and each resistance is worth 2, it then becomes equivalent to a single use of Lay on Hands. And you're not guaranteed to get 3 uses off of this in an average encounter, because you have to pick a mundane damage type, and then from there, you have to have enemies that are using that damage type, and if there's only one big boss enemy, you might get downed in just 2 hits instead, because 2 damage doesn't mean a lot when you're getting hit for 20. So it also doesn't scale as well as Lay on Hands, and also doesn't help your party heal out of combat like Lay on Hands. But no, this is their Lay on Hands equivalent ability. It's their thing that gives them that little bit of extra HP. Sure. And then here's their answer to Champion Reaction, the thing that makes it so that way they're punished for hitting your allies. And it has you fling yourself in the way of the harm, so it's like a Champion Reaction in terms of how much it resists. It's a little bit worse with regards to energy damage, because when you have resistance going, each instance of resistance is, each damage type is resisted separately from that resistance to all damage. So this resistance of 2+ level in the Champion Reaction case is actually resistance 2+ your level to fire, to acid, to poison, to all the different damage types. So if you have something that's hitting you for 5 fire, 5 cold, and you champion a reaction it to resist 4 of that, you're only taking 1 of each. However, if we go ahead and look at the Guardian again, it gives resistance against the triggering damage, which is physical only. And you gain a resistance to that triggering damage equal to the champion reaction, but now if there's an energy type slapped on, you're still eating that energy type. And also, a little sidebar here, bleed is a type of physical damage, so therefore you can bleed for your allies. But that's just playtest wording nonsense. I'm sure the designers did not intend for this to absorb bleed, but it technically can. You can absorb somebody's bleed damage and then use this resistance to eat it. I guess that's a niche. Sure. Also has shield block, standard for both champion and fighter, so not a super unique feature if we're talking about it as a unique tank. And then we have Taunt. This is really what should set them apart, because right now, they're an underwhelming version of champion, as per their class chassis right now. So with Taunt, you have them make a save against your class DC. On a success, you give them a bonus to hit you. And the rest of this text does not matter. Because they're not going to hit your allies anymore. You just debuffed yourself to the point where, on most levels, you're down to caster ACs. That or you're down to the ACs of your normal marshals, and there's no penalty for them not just swing into you and beat you to death with hammers. So, you're going to get beat to death with hammers now. And this is kind of a thing about choicer abilities. Giving the enemy a choice is almost always a bad thing. It is only playable when both options are bad, because an enemy will always pick the choice that is least bad for them. And so, when Gunslinger was first playtest, I saw the feat Cover Fire, and I laughed. And that's because it has this really interesting drawback as the first part of the ability. It has you strike somebody, and before you get to roll, it gives them the choice of they can take cover, giving a +4 bonus to their AC against that attack, but they also get a penalty on range attacks. Which, interesting, that's a cool choice. Or the attack just functions normally. And you would only use this ability when you think you're going to benefit from them picking the thing that gives them the +4 bonus to AC. But if you think the enemy is going to be hurt by making this choice, the enemy is going to be smart and pick the other thing, just have the strike function normally, so it's like this feat doesn't even exist due to how the game works. And so in order to rework this, the current version of Cover Fire that's in the game has a +1 bonus to the attack roll for that strike. So that way there is a penalty for the enemy going down and ignoring your little mini game that you're presenting them. Taunt has you draw aggro, but also has you lose your hit-taking ability in the process, because the thing that made you able to take hits was your armor proficiency, being so much better than the rest, getting up to legendary armor by 15 instead of champion 17. Getting rid of that armor bonus makes you just another character. And yeah, you're limiting enemy options technically, but it is still an action cost, even if you're combining with Razor Shield, even if you're doing it on several targets, there is still a cost involved in doing this activity. And that's something I really want to drive home, is that abilities that give an enemy a choice are only good if both choices are bad. Grappling is good in this game, because immobilizing an enemy means that they are either forced to attack their grappler, which is usually a bulky, strength-oriented character that they don't want to be in melee with, or they have to burn attack actions escaping. And I'm happy with either option that my opponent picks when I grapple somebody. This, if they hit me, I'm terrified, because I just gave them massive bonus. I wrote them a blank check to, hey, here's all my HP, go ahead and cash this in whenever you feel like. And this bonus that is being given stacks with getting flanked, so it stacks with off guard. It stacks with a bunch of other things that would make your armor go down more. So things are going to be critting you out as soon as you throw out this taunt. So you better be ready for the hitstorm that's coming. And if you are ready for the hitstorm that's coming, did the party need you in the first place? Because now suddenly they're at the point where something at fighter level armor can actually absorb all that damage. So why not just bring a fighter and end the fight sooner? Because enemies can't deal damage if they're dead. And enemies not dealing damage is the end goal of a tank. This doesn't progress the game state. This taunt, this intercept strike, this class doesn't generate momentum in any way. It doesn't actually meaningfully impact the game in a way that doesn't just like be a minor speed bump for an enemy. And there is a place in the game for a speed bump. It just needs to be a much, much bigger bump. So if they made this 12 HP, or they gave temp HP on the taunt, or they did what a specific render suggested with making, and this is Uncertain Cat's post, by the way, which I'm shamelessly stealing because it's a great idea. And it shows what taunts can do. And it has that +2 circumstance bonus to attack rolls against you be the backfire condition of this, where the other things is just enemies are forced to attack into you, which is a very potent thing. It's not full mind control, it's just you're being obnoxious, and that's forcing enemies to look at you. And they're going over a lot of the issues that I have as well. The Guardian is not really that tanky. It's equivalent both to like a fighter or a champion. And people are going to say, but you forgot about the resistance. The fighter isn't that bulky. It's like, come on. It's going to save you like maybe, what, 9 HP in a fight? Like, let's be honest here. How much is it actually going to save you? And I am down for people to playtest and say that I am super wrong on this, and I hope I am, but I really think I'm not. Like, this class has some issues. And that's really what I want to get across here. Let's go ahead and talk about specific feats now, because there are some feats that are legitimately way too good in this class. And notably, we can start that with, hey look, a fighter feat that Guardian has. This is one of their better feats. Long distance taunt. Lets you taunt with a range of 120 feet, so it forces range enemies to attack into you. Like, that's good, but this has also had people come up with the meme build of, well, why doesn't my Guardian just use a bow and then long distance taunt enemies when they're a melee creature and they can't spend all that time running back to me? To which I say, you did it. You found the way to make taunt work, but you're still going to need strength to have the class DC be there and blah, blah, blah. But you found a way to make taunt work. Taunt now functions as an ability that actively slows down the game in a way that actually has your allies survive more damage and puts it above champion. Potentially, maybe, not really. Still, you aren't making a lot of progress with that bow in terms of damage, but whatever. And if I'm looking at a range support, this is not it. Because now you're competing with Bard. And Bard can have Dirge of Doom at upper levels. Bard can throw out Demoralize, can throw out Fear spells, can mitigate damage by just healing them with Soothe. They can linger a +1 status bonus to hit for everybody on your team. So Bard does that kind of role better. So that meme build, not really a thing that one should go for, because, well, Bards and other spellcasters can just do that type of idea better. Yeah. I want to shout out Shoulder Check for just being like worst snagging strike. Sure, haha. Hampering Sweeps actually busted good. Like, would break the game if fighters could splash into this. Because suddenly you can never get away from a fighter's reactive strike if you're a mage. Because literally, you cannot get out of their reach. Period. There's no roll, no save, no anything. You just can't get out of their reach with move actions. You need to teleport away, which I don't know how they printed this even in a playtest, but that's my feedback. How did this get printed? Flying Tackle is a good movement combination ability, I guess. A stride and a half followed by a trip. I should mention, trip is a circumstance penalty to attack rolls from that enemy, which is exactly the same as your Taunt ability. So this is a non-bow with Taunt, as in an anti-combo, just doesn't work. It has some interesting feats, but none of them are good enough to warrant how mediocre its class chassis is. And when I look at its class chassis, with Taunt specifically, because Taunt is where all my issues kind of lie with this class. When I look at Taunt, I see a lot of things that remind me of Oracle, and not in a good way. Because if you look at the overall power level of the classes in this game, they're always chassis for this type of thing, plus a bit extra. Like you could say Fighter is the basic martial chassis, plus some extra accuracy. Barbarian is the basic martial chassis, plus a bit more damage. Rogue is the base martial chassis, plus some damage and a bunch of skills. And you can kind of do that for all the martials. The casters, you can say Cleric is the base caster chassis, plus a bunch of extra high-level spell slots, or higher rank slots. You can look at Druid as this is base caster chassis, but with better armor, and just really good focus spells. You point at Oracle, and you're like, that's a base caster chassis, but it has weird things happen when focus spells are used. They're both good and bad. This is trying to be very clever, like Oracle is trying to be clever. And I think that it falls on its face in the same way Oracle falls on its face. Because these downsides are bad. If your class's power budget is put into an ability that is actively harmful for you a lot of the time, that ability probably isn't that great. And I'd be happy if people proved me wrong and showed this class is actually great and you need to shut the hell up, you know nothing. I'd love that, to be clear. I want this class to be good. That's why I'm giving this feedback the way I am now. I think that this presents an opponent with a choice that is simply too good. Because they're always going to pick the option that has the tank get down to low HP quickly. And I have heard the argument that, well, Guardian lets all the damage be funneled onto one character, and that's a good thing. No, it isn't. Funneling all the damage onto one character is a way for somebody to get knocked out, and then them need to spend time picking themselves back up, picking up all their gear, and then getting back into the fight. The damage will stick around for a while. The healer can spend their 2-action heal when they need to. I don't think that this is super relevant. Getting all the damage onto one character. That's very often a bad thing, because now you're commanding your healer's attention now, instead of potentially next round, when they could have set up an important buff or debuff that round. Because spreading out the damage among the entire party is actually a benefit. I think that an optimal fight is one where all the characters on your side get down to half health and nobody goes below that. And Guardian is saying, well, what if we had one character get really, really low? I don't think that's a good plan, because that is a plan that falls apart as soon as something does a little bit more damage than you expect. When their thing that resists is already not active every single encounter. Because I think that when you're evaluating a Pathfinder class, you should not evaluate them based on the net average case. You should evaluate them based on their worst standard case. Ending one coming in here. Just wanted to quickly come in and say what I meant by worst standard case. And it's the case that happens pretty often in a severe fight where some of your abilities are just not as good as you'd fully want them to be in an optimal scenario, because those are the types of encounters where characters tend to die, and this game has permadeath. So if you're a class that doesn't work some of the time, you're going to have a bad time as soon as you start to roll low in those tougher fights. And the worst standard case, this ability never comes up. So if you're playing a very hard fight where all the enemies are dealing, I don't know, bludgeoning damage, and you're in plate armor which resists slashing, this is just flavor text. It doesn't do anything. Oops. The enemies aren't going to suddenly swap to a damage type to let you resist them. And it's very reasonable for enemies to be doing bludgeoning damage or piercing damage from bites. That's reasonable things to happen. It's reasonable for enemies to have short swords to choose a damage type that doesn't have you resist them. This class is like almost there. It's just that Taunt doesn't do enough. Intercept Strike just doesn't do enough. It doesn't do enough to put itself above the other tanks that already exist in this game. This class, honestly, after recording this video and really going through it, my opinions have changed since the live stream I did with Ron a little bit. It's not unplayable, it's just disappointing and pretty mediocre in a lot of ways. And I think that needs help, and I think the place to give it that help is on Taunt. Because I think if you just scrub off this +2 bonus here, Taunt becomes a really good ability, and the entire class becomes super exciting. I just think that you're presenting an enemy with a choice that doesn't actually function as a choice, in the same way Cover Fire presented an enemy with a choice that isn't actually a choice. I know people would ask if I didn't say it here, but can it wrestle? And my answer is, not really, no. I do think Wrestler is the best way to play Guardian, but I think the best way to play as a Guardian is to play a Champion instead. And Champion has direct buffs to athletics with things like Athletic Rush. People naturally don't want to attack Champions as well, so I think Champion is a better fit for Wrestler-type characters, especially since their higher strike accuracy at a lot of levels lends themselves to combat grab and suplex more. They have ways to buff unarmed strikes by worshipping Rory. There isn't really a reason to play a Guardian Wrestler compared to a Champion Wrestler, especially considering how more limited the reaction range of the Guardian is compared to the Champion reaction. So, much like the rest of the Guardian class, my answer is probably playable, but you really shouldn't, because other things are just kind of better at doing that slot, and that's a shame. Anyway, that's the end of my discussion on specifically the Guardian. So let me just finish this video on a more positive note, and we talk about the Commander. So here we have the most fun ability in Commander, Defensive Swap. Oh wait, this has you be able to swap with an ally and let you actually use your AC to take the hit instead of you just absorbing damage. So it actually would work to mitigate AC. Why couldn't this just be the Guardian's main ability? This works much better in Guardian than it would in Commander. I lied about talking about Commander. I just wanted to be the thing to go into Defensive Swap. Because, like, the Guardian's current reaction has you just absorb damage. If it forced enemies to roll against your AC when you use that reaction, it would be incredibly good. It would be a super efficient tank. But, again, a lot of minor adjustments that could be used to make the Guardian really sing, but right now, I'm very disappointed by it. And that's where I'm going to end off this video. I have midterms coming up soon, so you shouldn't expect too much from me over the next week or so. But, I posted enough as of late. You can enjoy the backlog. If Ron does a stream where he's doing a playtest of this, you can expect me to be there. But, yeah. Other than that, I think I'm gonna hop off for now. Have a good one.